No one knows who actually fired the first shot. That moment, when flint struck steel and the spark flashed into the black powder, was decisive.
Sent your firelocks.
There could be no going back.
Fire!
One kneeling militiaman, Jonas Parker, was bayoneted as he tried to reload. Jonathan Harrington was shot in the back and died just there, on his doorstep, in front of his wife. Only the arrival of Colonel Smith and the rearguard put an end to the bloodletting. 8 militiamen were dead. Sam Adams, with John Hancock, had only just left Lexington and was still in earshot. This bloodshed was exactly what he had been working for. Who actually fired this shot heard round the world? It's impossible to be sure. And in any case, it doesn't really matter, because by now conflict was inevitable. This wasn't the first blow of the American Revolution. That had already been struck with the takeover of civil authorities across the whole of Massachusetts. This was the first shot of the Civil War. That bloodletting that Thomas Gage had feared had now begun. The British pressed on to Concord, still unaware of the size and determination of the irregular force assembled against them. From up to 50 miles around, Paul Revere and his chain of riders had mobilized thousands of militiamen, spoiling for exactly this sort of fight. When Colonel Smith arrived at Concord, he found that most of the arms had already been moved. A small detachment was sent over this, the town's north bridge, to secure the weapons from Barrett's farm. About 100 soldiers were left to guard the bridge itself. Although there were already hundreds of militia on the far side, they took no action until they saw smoke and flames coming from the town. The thought of their homes being torched by the redcoats enraged the militiamen, and the cry went up, "Would you let them burn the town down?" Then something remarkable happened. This supposed rabble formed into rough lines and opened a well-aimed fire, killing 3 soldiers. Many of these rebels had served with the British against the French in the 7 Years' War, just 12 years before. About 200 militia charged over the bridge and headed for the town, following the retreating redcoats. Shortly afterwards, the British force reappeared that had been sent to Barrett's farm. As it crossed the bridge, it found a dying British soldier. According to redcoat accounts, he'd been scalped and had his ears and brain removed. It was the first atrocity story of the war. This is a war between brothers, between cousins. That's what gives events in a place like this their strange and terrible edge. These are battles between people who could so easily have been friends and often were friends. It was still only midday when the isolated British force began its withdrawal. But the swarm of 7,000 militia were in no mood to let it pass unmolested. The redcoats would have to run the terrifying gauntlet all the way back to Boston. At this bend in the road, still called Bloody Curve, perhaps 30 redcoats were killed by rebels waiting in ambush. The British, confined to the road, were sitting targets. The rebels, firing from the cover of trees and walls, picked off the faltering column. They adopted the simple tactic of gathering wherever there was cover. They knew the British had to come back along this route. With Lexington in sight, and the column almost back to square one, British discipline crumbled at last. Some men sank to the ground exhausted, others ran, and still others fought hand-to-hand with militia in a desperate attempt to find water to drink. It seemed as if the end had come. But it had not. Thomas Gage, warned of the gathering militia storm, had sent out a relief column under his second-in-command, Lord Percy. It was already 3:15 in the afternoon.
Fire!
This was like the Hollywood cavalry arriving in the nick of time. With new heart, the column set off back for Boston, with better discipline, moving more slowly, and with more effective use of flankers to keep the rebels at arm's length.
Flankers are coming!
The flankers' job was to push the enemy away from the flanks of the main column. Here, they'd probably have held the edge of that wood. This was a dangerous and grueling job. The rebels began to exploit a tactic of their own. This was a rolling burst of fire, constantly raking Percy's exposed column. Once they'd taken their potshots, they were able to ride or run to the next vantage point. Here at Arlington, some redcoats began to take their revenge. Snipers were flushed from the houses, and the troops were in no mood to take prisoners. One old Yankee fought to the death, having refused to leave his house, declaring, "An Englishman's home is his castle."